Greetings! Today's video will be dedicated to the topic of database spoofing as part of testing a .NET Core application that interacts with the database through the Entity Framework. The test engine, as the name suggests, is xUnit. The topic of preparation of the project and database connection is beyond the scope of our discussion. Therefore, at the start, we already have a working project with a connected database and installed libraries. In order not to stretch the video, I am not going to describe the components necessary for testing. You can find their list at the link in the description. The system under test is a simplified stand containing a minimum of elements for demonstration. Don't scold me for the script architecture and lack of code organization. The project contains only the most necessary elements. So we have a standard mechanism for connecting the database context in the startup. The type of the database is not important for us, so we can use SQL Server, use SQLite, maybe MySQL here. EntiryFramework hides the details of the database from the application, and it doesn't matter for us what database is behind its facade. Our context contains a single articles entity, described by a simple model that contains only a couple of fields, the ID of the entry and the article's name. Obviously, in a real project there will be many more fields, nested objects and so on, but for our today's needs this is enough. Well, the main character of today's conversation is the article repository class. It is it who is responsible for interacting with the database and performs all operations with the article entity. To discuss context mocking, we only need to look at one method, listArticles. We may consider options for testing CRUD operations of repository classes in subsequent videos, but context substitution will be identical in all the cases. Keeping in mind one of the key principles of testing, we must provide a clean database for each of our tests. Isolation is our everything. It makes no sense to come up with data cleaning mechanism in nowadays conditions. This complicates the system and makes the test code more fragile. Therefore, we will simply create a new instance of the database for each test. Let's write a small factory class to generate the context. I recommend making it static because experience shows that playing with instantiation through new or even more any attempts to implement dependency injection just create unnecessary noise and do not bring any practical benefit. The class gonna contain only two methods. First of all, we need to create an instance of DbContext options. Clients of our class do not need to know about the method, and therefore it will be private. First, let's create the service provider based on the in-memory database from the Microsoft Extensions Dependency Injection namespace. The next one is the standard builder for our context. In this case, DataContext, but your name of course may be different. We call using memory database. The name here can be anything, let it be BD. But creating a new instance of in-memory database root is very important. This is the key to generating new database instances. And we connect our provider. That's it. The method is implemented and it remains to make some public getter that generates an instance of our context using our custom options. And here we are. Basically, this is all with the necessary preparation and we can already start writing tests. Let's create the article repository tests class. In it, we need instances of the article repository, the class under test, and the database contexts. The key step is to create a context. We get an instance of it from our factory and pass it to the repository class constructor. Now each test inside of the article repository class will receive its own database instance and will be completely isolated from the colleagues. To check our implementation, let's write a simple test that checks the number of records in the database. Of course, we automatically generate a collection of articles. If you're not familiar with this approach, I recommend you to refer to the materials in the video description. It is especially worth paying attention to the fact that working with the fake context is built on the same basis as in the production code. Do not forget about the save changes call. Let's call the method. And we check that the number of returned records meets our expectations. Then that's all. If you have any questions or difficulties, feel free to write comments. Also, you can directly write to me on the site, link in the description. And thank you for your attention.